Hello, everybody. Welcome to this video where I'm going to be answering some questions. I'm actually going to be only answering one metaphysical or philosophical question and one cognitive or psychological question. I'm going to read all the questions right now because I think they're very interesting. And if you want to make another video or if you want to make a video or try to answer these questions in the comments or work with these, that would be awesome. Now, I have 10 metaphysical questions or philosophical questions from ChatGPT and 10 cognitive or psychological questions from ChatGPT as well. So I have 20 in total from ChatGPT. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a card, and basically the first either 1 to 10 or the first 1 to 10 number that comes out, that's the question I'm going to be answering. So I'm actually, like I mentioned, going to only answer one question from each of these two lists. And I'm going to tell you all the questions in the beginning. And I have another list from the University of Colorado Boulder. It's a PDF of 57. These are metaphysical questions. So we could say these are purely philosophical questions. Now, the problem here is that I feel like I've been talking a lot about philosophy or metaphysics. And what I want to do is balance it out with psychological or cognitive questions. So I'm going to start first with this list because it's a big old list. It's 57 questions. So I'm going to read them all and basically have them here as a reference point, right? Okay, so the first one is there anything that must be true of absolutely everything that exists? Number 2, must anything that exists have intrinsic properties? 3, what are properties? Are they universal or tropes? Or 4, must anything that exists stand in some relation to something else? 5, must anything that exists be completely determinate, or can there be vague objects? 6, can there be things that exist that are not in time? 7, is there anything that is not part of the spatial temporal world? 8, what are the truth makers for mathematical statements? 9, what are numbers? 10, can there be necessarily existent entities? 11, what is it for something to be an actual entity? 12, is everything that exists an actual entity? 13, what are the truth makers for statements of logical possibility? 14, do merely possible worlds exist? 15, what sorts of things are possible worlds? 16, is change really possible? 17, can there be things that are in principle unobservable? 18, can one make sense of a non-reductionist view of theoretical entities? 19, can there be aspects of reality that are in principle unknowable? 20, why is there something rather than nothing? 21, could the world contain only dispositional properties? 22, can there be pure dispositional properties? That is, properties that have no categorical basis. 23, what is time? 24, is time real or an illusion? 25, could time be cyclic? 26, can there be time without change? 27, is space real or an illusion? 28, is space itself an entity, or is it reducible to spatial relations between objects and events? 29, what are laws of nature? 30, do laws of nature govern the occurrence of events in time? 31, are there laws of nature? 32, what is causation? 33, is causation real or an illusion? 34, could a cause succeed its effect? 35, could a cause and its effect be simultaneous? 36, are causal facts supervenient upon non-causal facts? 37, do causal relations between events presuppose causal laws? That one's interesting. 38, is the world a deterministic one? 39, what are persistent substances? Are they bundles of properties or properties plus a substratum? Or 40, what constitutes identity over time? 41, do objects perdure or endure? 42, does the physical universe depend upon the existence of an immaterial creator? 43, is there a necessarily existent being upon which the contingent world depends for its existence? What if it's not a contingent world, right? 44, could there be a person who was not in time? 45, can persons be analyzed in terms of person stages? 46, is the self a bundle of experiences? 47, is the self a bundle of powers? 48, do humans involve immaterial souls? 49, do humans involve any properties that are not reducible to the properties that characterize the inanimate world? 50, what is consciousness? 51, what is intentionality? What is it for a mental state to be about something? Nice. 52, could consciousness be a purely physical phenomenon? 53, could intentionality be a purely physical phenomenon? 54, are humans free? 55, is freedom compatible with determinism? 56, do humans possess libertarian free will? And 57, is there such a thing as agent causation? Okay, and we're going with the 20. First, the 10 metaphysical questions, structures of being, of reality, being, and existence. 1, why does anything persist rather than dissolve instantly into nothing? That is not why something exists, but why it continues. 2, is possibility a property of reality or a projection of human limitation? 3, can causality exist without time, or is time merely the appearance of causation? 4, is identity a feature of objects or a constraint imposed by language and memory? 5, does reality have an intrinsic direction, or is it teleology entirely retrospective? Or is teleology entirely retrospective? 6, if laws of nature are invariant, why do they permit novelty at all? 7, is space something that contains things or something generated by relations between things? 8, could reality be fundamentally unfinished? Excuse me. And if so, unfinished relative to what? 9, is absence, nothing, void, lack ontologically real or only conceptually defined? 10, if reality were perfectly intelligible, would it still be real or merely formal? And cognitive questions, mind, meaning, knowledge, and self-reference. Number 1, what must the mind ignore in order to function coherently? 2, is understanding an act of discovery or an act? Is understanding an act of discovery or an act of compression? 3, can a belief be rational in its origins? No. Can a belief be rational if its origin is opaque to the believer? 4, where does meaning reside when no interpretation is being performed? 5, is self-awareness an enhancement of cognition or a side effect of error detection? 6, can thought escape the structures that make thought possible? 7, do concepts reveal reality or do they protect us from it? 8, is certainty a cognitive achievement or a psychological defense? 9, what kind of knowledge becomes inaccessible once it is made explicit? And 10, is the self something that thinks or something that is inferred after thinking occurs? We're going to try to do something a little bit different now. What I'm going to do, I dropped a card, is I'm going to start with one of the psychological ones. All right. So shuffling. I've been shuffling the cards. Let's pick this one. 8. All right. 8 says, is certainty a cognitive achievement or a psychological defense? This one's pretty interesting. What I'm going to try to do is first answer it with obvious or evident explanations, and then from there question those and go deeper, right? For both of the questions. So, is certainty. So certainty first, it's when you we can say, first of all, scientifically, empirically, it's when you know something to be a fact or to be true, right? Like you can say Mount Everest is so many meters high or tall or whatever, right? Or we are breathing oxygen, or atoms exist, right? So certainties, in a way, come from science. We can right away enter the psychological realm by talking about emotions, pain, right, which is subjective, but everybody feels it. Love, happiness, sadness, and then we can talk about like the unconscious. And in order to access it, like I've been reading in this book, we can start off by bridging it with sleeping, right, and dreaming, and a meditative state and a thinking state, even a planning stage, right? A metacognitive stage. So when we talk about those type of things, it's less certain, but we can still be certain of things, right? Especially when we talk of memory, we can say, well, I remember this happened. I remember feeling this way, or currently I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling happy, right? So those would be more subjective certainties, but that we can still say those are certainties. So we can say certainties can be physical or mental, right? They can either be like exterior certainties, such as Mount Everest, the historical facts, right? World War II happened between 1939 and 1945. Those are certain, right, events that happened. Um, and we can also have, of course, like mental, psychological, emotional certainty of your own subjective experience. Now, the question asked, is that which is certain, a cognitive achievement or a psychological defense? So here we're not getting philosophical. We're not entering the realm of reality of what constitutes certainty. We're just simply saying certainty is this, right? It could either be knowing a fact to be true or knowing your subjective experience to be true. Um, and the question is asking whether that is a cognitive achievement of the mind in terms of evolution, right? Or a psychological defense. Now, what would distinguish or differentiate a cognitive achievement from a psychological defense? Well, a cognitive achievement can be, for example, the ability to speak. We can say the linguistic faculty that we have, to a certain extent, interpretation, poetry, creativity, because, well, if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, right? Primitives, or our ancestors, maybe they were able to like work with reality, right? Like defending themselves from attacks and things like that. But then eventually they got comfortable enough to be able to play around with the mind, right? To create things, the notion of capital, the notion of money, bartering, exchanging goods and services, things like this. And those are achievements of civilization, right? We can talk about great achievements such as the printing press, communication, telephones, the internet, computers, the invention of money, going all the way back to the invention of fire, or harnessing the power of fire in reality, because fire was already there, right? In thunderstorms and things like that. So we can talk about achievements um, from civilization in those type of evolutionary terms. I don't know if we can talk about achievements without a timeline, without entering a sort of temporal basis, right? Where we say, well, this wasn't here before and now it is, and it's helping us because before it wouldn't help us and we were struggling, right? So those are more tangible achievements, right? But thanks to the mind, we have been able to have them. Now, if we talk about purely cognitive achievements, what would that look like? Would that look like memory, for example, the ability to learn, to educate ourselves, to share and spread ideas, to influence others, right? Um, so in this case, certainty in that area, uh, we can even say that certainty. I'm getting this idea right now that certainty is actually can actually be weaponized, right? So it can be translated or interpreted or viewed as a tool to as a cognitive achievement to basically be used upon others, right? Now, if we talk about it in terms of psychological defense for all of humanity, including one or including ourselves, including people that manipulate or people that influence others or people that see, there's the notion of like God, right? And the certainty that, for example, missionaries had, after Jesus passed and his 12 disciples became missionaries, and the certainty with which they preached, right? And after them, so many others preached to be able to expand and extend religion, right? That certainty can be a type of cognitive achievement in terms of persuading, influencing, convincing others, right? There's a lot of different words for that, such as indoctrinate. I have the synonyms here: instruct, convince, persuade, brainwash, all that stuff, right? All that good stuff. So that's in terms, I would say, in terms of using it, right? It's a cognitive achievement in terms of its application, right? What do you use certainty for? Well, you use certainty to convince others. Why? To bring them together. Why? So they can work together. Why? So they can fulfill certain objectives, such as reaching the promised land, reaching heaven, or such as getting people to work together at a company, right? We stand behind these values. We are certain that we are in it for our clients, right? And the company will preach that to convince others with certainty, right? Convince people. Now, if we talk about it in terms of a psychological defense, this is getting a little bit more metaphysical, because then we could be saying that, see, what this question hides or implies is that we're not certain, right? And by talking about certainty as a psychological defense means that we're using it as a shield against something else, which in fact could be the other part of the truth, or or could be really what's happening, could be really the whole truth. So let me give you an example. So psychological defenses are used to negate or avoid that which is harmful to you. So if someone says, um, I don't know, it was your fault that the milk spilled, right? And you say, no, what actually happened was that someone said my name out loud, and in that moment I was surprised, so I just accidentally knocked it off. But it wasn't my fault. It was actually the other guy's fault who said my name out loud and scared me, and I jumped and I knocked the glass of milk off the counter or whatever. That's it's part of the psychological defense mechanisms from Anna Freud, Freud's daughter, where there's like a list of them, where even rationalization, very interestingly, is one of them. So you can negate, you can get mad, you can subliminate, you can use all types of different defense psychological mechanisms or psychological defense mechanisms to avoid the uncomfortable truth, right? So in this case, what this part of the question would entail would be that there is no certainty, right? And the fact that we say we're certain about something makes it so we're comfortable living that lie, right? Now, if we were to say, well, we can argue and say things change, so even that which we think is certain now may not be in the future, hence making certainty really an illusion, and for that matter, a psychological temporary defense, right? Now, to answer this question, then having the definitions or the background of each part, is certainty a cognitive achievement or a psychological defense? Uh, and then, see, I can say this. I can say right now, it's a cognitive achievement because it's not only a tool we can use, but we can actually use it also as a psychological defense, right? So I would say, sure, it's a psychological defense, but what about that? See, and this is like getting immediately philosophical. What about that which we are certain about, which is certainty or which is true, right? Because we talk a lot of this idea that things change and there's nothing given. We don't know the truth in reality because we're limited by our five senses as humans, etc. But what if we're right about a lot of stuff as humans, right? That would be interesting. What if there are things that we think now that will pass the test of time, right? And at the end of mankind or the universe, those things were a certainty, right? So I would say to to say that certainty is a psychological defense would be to imply that we're wrong completely about certain things that we're certain about, right? So we don't know that for sure. We can't know that for sure. Just as we've been wrong, we've been right, and just as we can be wrong at the end about everything, we can be right about certain stuff at the end. So I'm going to say it's a cognitive achievement. Gun to my head in this false dilemma, because certainty can be other things too. What type of other things could it be if not illusion or achievement? Let me think. Certainty. Well, see, here we're saying it could either be something that we should be proud of, or it could be something that we can lie about. What about saying working with their antonyms right away? Certainty is something we should be ashamed of. So we can be ashamed about certainty, or certainty should be something that we should treat like fact, like truth, right? Certainty should be viewed as what else? Maybe, well, what is certainty? Like I mentioned, we have certainty can be viewed as a filter, no, as the feedback which reality gives back to us, when we're able to prove certain things to be true, when certain things pass the test of time. But well, okay. Anyway, in this case, like I mentioned, gun to my head, I have to pick between one of them based on the reasoning I just did live in front of y'all. I'm going to say that certainty is a cognitive achievement, because that would also imply the usage of it as a psychological defense. Now, if you were to tell me, well, you can only choose one, and when you choose one or the other, you eliminate the other. So you have to actually argue against the other. Why wouldn't be the other thing? See, I can say then, if it's a psychological defense, it's not a cognitive achievement, because we didn't get there through we didn't achieve evolutionary progress cognitively speaking with certainty, because again we would be wrong about everything up to now, right? So no, so yeah, I'm going to completely say See, the only thing that's keeping me tied to the psychological defense argument is the fact that we've been wrong in the past as mankind, as humankind and civilization and people, but I don't know if we'll be wrong in the future. I mean, I think we will. And because of that fact, I can say, well, certain things function as a psychological defense, as preferences, as prejudices, right? As things that we're lying to ourselves about just to make ourselves feel at ease or comfortable, etc. So it has more of an emotional function. Um, and then we can say, well, what makes it, is that which serves an emotional comfort, um is that first logical, right? Or or is that which makes us comfortable emotionally first, and then that and then we like logic our way into understanding it, right? Well, that would be like a different question, but yeah, gun to my head, I'm gonna say it's a cognitive achievement. Why? Again, because we can be wrong, but we can be right. And in terms of evolution, um, the idea, I mean, if we're talking about the concept of certainty, because we can say our ancestors were certain about a lot of things. If for instance they heard a noise in the wilderness among trees and they thought it was a predator, one of two things could be true. Either it wasn't a predator and they were mistaken, so they were certain or they were suspicious of something, right? Or let's say back then they were certain, right? But it wasn't an explicit concept. They didn't say, I'm certain there's an animal over there, Fred. No, like it was just like, I'm certain there's an animal, so I'm gonna wait for it to come around the corner, come around that tree and kill it or whatever. That's one. Or the other, there was in fact an animal, right? A predator, and they were right. They were certain, right? See, what right there, I just thought that certainty precedes knowing, because when you're right, you knew. When you're right, you know, right? If you say there's a predator around the corner, there's an animal, uh I'm certain of it. See, there's even like a sliver, a shiver, no, sliver of doubt in saying, in talking about certainty as a concept, because if you're it's like you're betting, right? It's like you're betting that you're right, but it's not being right. It's being certain that you're right. So when you say I'm certain that I'm right, you yet don't know, right? And if there is an animal, then you confirm your certainty, right? So it kind of is a psychological defense, but I'm going to say it's an evolutionary cognitive achievement because of the concept, because of because we can now talk of it, right? And before, maybe our ancestors would feel it and live it, but weren't able to talk about it as a concept. And being able to talk about certainty as a concept in itself, linguistically speaking, is a cognitive achievement. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with it being a cognitive achievement, certainty. Um and yeah, I mean, like, just to finish off this thought, this this part, this first part, I could say certainty is seen in a lot of like secure people. People will say, like, people that are sure of themselves, that are cool, calm, and collected, that aren't nervous, that speak in public, that are charismatic, that are charming, etc. Right? Certainty is one of their qualities. Salespeople, think of salespeople. So salespeople can tell you that, again, they can influence you, they can try to persuade you, they can convince you, they can brainwash you. You believe them, right? Because they're certain about something. You know, they say the more certain you are about something, the more sure of yourself and sure of that thing that you're speaking of, the more people will believe you, right? And in that case, I forgot where I was going with this, but oh yeah, well, salespeople are sure of themselves, and they act again. They act based on certainty, but it could be false. See, that's the only downside to saying that it is a cognitive achievement, because what happens if certainty, or what happens when certainty actually fails us, right? When certainty fails us, we don't see it as a cognitive achievement. We start to downgrade it as a psychological defense, and then eventually downgrade it more into an illusion, and then eventually into falsehood, right? We were wrong about this that we were certain about before. Okay, anyway, thought I broke that down pretty nightly, pretty neatly and nicely. Okay, let's go with the second. Uh, no, I dropped a bunch of cards. Okay, so I guess it's this one. 5. Okay, so this one on the metaphysical question says, does reality have an intrinsic direction, or is teleology entirely retrospective? Okay, so here, this one's interesting because I've been getting into the topic of teleology lately. So let's understand the question first of all. Does reality, so we're talking about the context, everything, where we are, the universe, which in sorry, the video I made before this one called well, the one before this one, I talked about the fact that reality can be divided into two. So you can talk about reality as that which is everywhere, right? And then non reality would be that which is not here, like not in any of this space in which we are living in the universe and the whole cosmos, whatever. So that's one type of reality, context, space we can talk about. The other one is local, which has to do with you and your circle of influence, that which influences you, you influence that, and that which doesn't affect you isn't your reality, right? So if a supernova blew up somewhere, millions and billions of light years away, that's not your reality because it doesn't affect you, right? So this is because I was speaking of what is natural, right? And I was saying that natural is everything which happens, and I ran into like a sort of problem there because I was saying that that which is natural is everything which is in this space, right? Globally speaking, universally speaking. But then I started saying that which doesn't influence you is not really natural, because it's not making you who you are, or something like that. So I got caught up in that mess, which I haven't really resolved. But anyway, so reality, does reality have intrinsic direction, or is teleology entirely retrospective? So teleology refers to the analysis or the study of the end effect, the end of everything, right? So basically, like the objective. What is the objective of all this? What is the purpose of all this? What is the meaning of all this? Why are we? So it's not the deontological question, which is where do we come from? What caused this? Who is the creator? Is it God? Is it reality? Is it fate, destiny? Is it the universe? What? It's not that. It's what is the end game here, right? And well, we deal with this when we talk of cause and effect on a daily basis, right? I get up late and I arrive to work late, right? So the cause is I woke up late, and the effect is I arrived late. So I'm able to make that analysis because I've either done it in the past, or it happened that day, and later on in the day I think back to my morning and I say, well, retroactively I think back, which is the same thing. Thinking back is being retroactive, is going back. I think back, well, the fact that I woke up late caused my arriving late, right? And that's the end game. That's what happened, right? That was like the purpose, we can say, the objective of waking up late, right? Um, so this question, this metaphysical question, asks us if things could be analyzed, and it's very interesting because then if we say that things are teleology or teleological, read or they are, that in order to analyze the objective of things, we have to look back on them, then we could say that end game is to be retroactive, right? Because imagine the end of times. The last event, the last cause, the last effect, the last impact happens. Boom, whatever it is happens, right? The lights shut off. How are you able to know that, right? In order to know that, there would have to be a like an after an after event, which would imply some entity thinking back on that thing, hence making the thinking, the reflection, the act of thinking retroactively on the end game, on the teleology, the real, true last act, right? So then we run into a problem there, because then is that the end game, to reflect, to think back? Or is there something that is there is it is see, then we can say, is the last event, teleologically speaking, an action, an event, or a thought, right? Or could it be both at the same time? I don't know. It's like knowing you're gonna die and thinking you're gonna die, and that's the last, and thinking how you're gonna die, and then as you're dying, you're also thinking about it, right? Simultaneously, like, so it's both an event, an action, and a thought, a mental process. Okay. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, but does reality have an intrinsic direction? Speaks. Okay, but how do these two things relate? Because by answering the question, does reality have an intrinsic direction? That means that reality in itself, for the mere fact of existing, is leading us somewhere, right? Like we're headed somewhere intrinsically, right? Like all of this is here for a reason, and it has a purpose, and it has an end game. And it's just in itself, right? Which would make us think of fate, destiny, would comfort us, would make us think that everything happens for a reason. There's, because the the other side of this argument would be that there is no like purpose to anything. There's no intrinsic direction. All of this is just accidental and neutral, and we're really not here for a reason, right? Now, how does it relate to, is theology entirely retrospective? Entirely. So, yeah, this means that we can't think of, I'm having like a hard time processing this question, but this means that we can't think of, like I just mentioned, the effect of something without, no, we can't make the effect of something known without having another effect, another consequence, which is the fact of thinking about it. See, that's mind blowing, because then, because again, we can say, how do you know, how are you going to make it evident that when you woke up late, you arrived late? You need another event, which later in the day you thought of the fact that you arrived late to work because you woke up late, making that event the real end, right? Because without it, and then we run into that problem of, if the tree falls and there's no one around to hear it, did it make a sound, right? So if the event happens and there's no one to think about it, can we then talk about causation? Does causation, which I think was one of the questions, does the thing happen independently of human observation, right? Now, I'm having a problem linking those two, or seeing the relationship between. Okay, so if reality has an intrinsic direction, why wouldn't that be? Why couldn't that entail uh, the end game being entirely retrospective? Mm, let me see. I got to think about that for a second. So teleology makes reference to the analysis of the endings, and see, we run into that problem with teleology, because if it's entirely retrospective, then we can't. Um, then the retrospection is the end game, right? And then if there is an intrinsic direction to everything, okay, I may not understand it fully, but I'm going to go with this. If reality has an intrinsic direction, that means that we don't have to, again, we don't have to view things, we don't even have to view things retroactively for them to have an end game, right? So going back to the end of times, to the end of the universe or whatever, um, this would mean that reality would finish, right? If it has an intrinsic direction, it would end without having that end be analyzed, right? So there's no what do they call this in movies? There's no um after scene, or I think it's called there's no, yeah, like the scene after the credits in a movie, right? There's no commentary, there's no analysis, right? So I kind of understand it in those terms, and I may be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But the way I'm going to answer this then is by saying I think reality. Oh, but then we run into the problem of there being like an intrinsic direction. Okay. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to strip intrinsic direction from any moral meaning. So I'm going to answer it like this. Reality for me is not, or doesn't have to be, uh, teleology, entirely retrospective. So um, it's not teleological uh, entirely, no, retrospective, right? For me, it's not. So when reality finishes, see, but it's not talking about reality. It's not talking about the end of times. It's just talking about reality in general, like here in the past, in the day to day. Okay, well, let me answer it first like that. The first thing I was gonna do. So for me, the end game would not have to be defined, would not have to be marked, or there would not have to be a commentary, right? Like a post analysis of everything that was reality, right? When it ends or whatever. For me, reality can have an intrinsic direction, but it's neutral, right? So whatever happens. It's like a more pragmatic, practical point of view. So reality can have an intrinsic direction, it can have an end game, but we may not know what it is. So it's not retrospective, because again, that would be a paradox. We can't make the end something that we can analyze after the end, right? Because then the analysis would be the real end, right? Not the end. So yeah, since it's a contradiction, um, now you can say, well, what if reality's intrinsic direction or end game is really for there to be like a commentary, a post analysis of what just happened in in reality, in the universe, in all time. Um, I doubt it. Probability is very low. Um, because it could just be like a cosmic event. Like I once watched a video where it's like turning off the lights of the universe. Like eventually all stars just die and there's just pitch black forever. That's kind of what would happen. So I'm gonna go for now and maybe excuse my ignorance, but I'm gonna go with the with the answer that reality has an intrinsic direction, um, but it may not be like what we think morally meaningful. Like, there's a reason for everything, and it might just be like something so neutral as turning off the lights of the universe, right? So something not spectacular, not Hollywood film in the making, just something so plain, so simple, right? Or it may be something like spectacular, I don't know, but it's not there for us, right? It's not like, oh, the humans are here, so we need to make a big deal out of this now since it's the end of all time. No. Now, going back um to the other topic, which had to do with the fact that maybe it's not the end game, because I'm bringing that into the mix and maybe that's not what the question is asking. uh See, the question has like many directions, and trying to tie it in is kind of like, it's kind of hard. um yeah, because just like the other one, it's a dilemma, right? It's either this or that. So let's just think that the question is asking about every day, day to day. Let's go back to the example of waking up late, showing up to work late. um in that case, if I say reality has an intrinsic direction, I would still need to say that I think reality has an intrinsic direction, because I kind of feel it like an arrow. Like just the mere fact that something happens after something makes it so that there is a certain direction, right? Now, intrinsic is hard to tackle here, because then we would have to get into the topic of intrinsic, meaning that there's an ulterior plan beyond the plan that you have, like an unconscious plan, which I could get in line with. I can say, sure, the fact that you arrived late to work was actually something that needed to be done because your boss needed to call you in so you could talk about this other thing that, like there is a plan, right? Which again sounds very romantic, very ideal. Like there's a reason for everything, and I don't want to fall into that cliche, but we can talk about it in terms of the end game of the universe too, right? The finality, or the finale, right, of something could be something as simple as maybe your boss needed to tell you hello, right? I don't know, like something so trivial. It doesn't have to be sexy or romantic or meaningful or moral. It could just be something like that. So I'm gonna say, in the day to day, there are arrows that are guiding us, um, but how do we know that? See, we run into that problem because then we have to say, well, the only way to know that is by knowing it retroactively. See, and we run into that same problem again of the tree. Um, so, what I'm going to say here is that the tree does make a sound, even if humans aren't there to view it, because otherwise you would be saying that sound is a byproduct of human beings, and it's not. See, that's like reality. It's like reality only exists inside our heads. Sure, we don't know if what's out there is really out there, right? And our head is just like making all these things, but some variation, there's some stimuli that's coming in, right? Which is from the outside, from reality. whether it's exactly the way that we're viewing it or not is irrelevant because something's coming in, right? And the fact that something is coming in makes it so that there's something out there, right? Um, so I'm gonna go with the hard, kind of scientific, rational perspective here and say that it's not necessary for us to reflect or think back, right? Because that makes it very anthropocentric, right? That makes it very like boastful and egotistical. Like the universe cannot happen without human beings. No, like whatever this is, whatever this reality is happening, right? Regardless of whether we're seeing it or not, right? It's not, the universe is not here for us. I don't think that. Now you can take that stance and say, yes, it is, right? Fine, and give me your arguments and we can debate it because that would be very interesting, honestly. But for now, I'm gonna say that I don't think so. And I think it's not necessary for us to retrospectively look at the cause and effect of something in order to validate it. So I'm going to go with the answer reality has an intrinsic direction, right? And not a teleology, or not a and not an entirely teleological introspection, right? Yeah. So so these questions are pretty nice. They get you to open up on a lot, and I saw a lot of interesting ones here. So these were dilemmas. So I kind of ran. Both of them were dilemmas. So even though one was 8 and one was 5, but I ran into having to define both of those both of the, yeah, literally two pairs of dilemmas, and then after defining them having to choose one. So by choosing one, by default you need to negate the other one, right? And you need to back that claim up, right? Because if you just say, well, it depends, or it's a little bit of both, or that's not being rigorous, that's just being dumb and taking the easy way out, right? So it's funner to try to take a stance and play along and play around with what type of conclusions you can reach. So to finish this up, let's go back to the psychological one about certainty. It made me think about certainty and the fact that certainty is a quality or a characteristic that we find in persuasion. So you need to come across as certain, but also certainty has a before or a priori quality to it, which is like the fact or the idea that it can misalign, the potential that it can misalign or not fit with reality, right? Like the example of there's a predator because I heard a noise, but it could just be a bunny or the wind, right? So I could be wrong, I could be right, but certainty doesn't care. Certainty bets on being right, but again, it's betting. So you could be wrong and you are wrong sometimes, right? And sometimes you're right. So that's an interesting quality of certainty. And it makes sense because that's salespeople, right? Salespeople lie. Sometimes they don't lie, but a lot of people think they lie anyway all the time because they're trying to make their sale or whatever. Um, and then the question of reality, um, it was tougher to tackle. I think it's because it's metaphysical, and it entails a lot of, it involves a lot of different things. But I think what I take away from here is the fact that, well, I talked about cause and effect. Let me remember. Oh yeah, the amazing, right? The amazing idea that there can be another end cause or another end effect, another end to the end, which makes it a mental process, which makes it a thought process, right? Without retroactively thinking about cause and effect, well, you can't make it evident, right? That's just it. It for me, again, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It exists, and the fact that we don't see it doesn't really take away the fact that it happened, right? Even though we can't confirm it, right? So we would enter that realm then of confirmation and of knowing, right? But I think there have also, I would argue, there have been many things that have happened before that have brought us certain things, and we don't know the true causes of certain things, right? So it's just like a like like a chain of events going back, who knows how far back, right? So in that case, yeah, it's interesting to think that there can be another effect after the effect. So the fact that that happens, that cause and effect happens, leads me to another. See, that can be like summarized as a cause. The fact, for example, that I woke up late and I arrived late to work is in itself a cause that leads me to the effect of thinking about it, hence noticing cause and effect. And even the fact that I can think about cause and effect is an effect of cause and effect, of the cause and effect, right? So that's wonderful stuff. All right, anyway, I think I'll finish off the video here for now, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.